So as Lisa mentioned, we are recording at this point. So if you want to ensure that you're on mute, and then we'll open up for questions. But as we're going along, if you want to unmute and ask a question or put something in the chat box, and Lisa will be scanning the chat box and she'll interrupt me on your behalf. So welcome to week 7 of implementing SPARC and TRAC on your campus. This week, we're going to talk about adding video and accessibility functions. So if you've been following along, we've been talking a lot about really the overall project management of getting SPARC and or TRAC to actual deployment on your campus. So the very front end in those first couple weeks, we're really getting into like getting your content ready. And we talked a lot. We spent quite a few weeks talking about all the things that you need to do to get your video done. And we haven't talked about that in a while. So we're going to come back. So hopefully, you know, if we're going through all of these steps, this would be the point where you're getting videos back from your videographer. They've got a background dropped in if you had done them on a green screen. So we're going to talk about how do we get those loaded into Articulate today, and then not only doing the closed captioning, which would be the accessibility function for the video, but also talking about tab order and alt image tags and how do we access all of those functions. So our goals for this week are importing and editing video within Articulate. There are some basic editing skills that you have, or editing tools that you have access to within the system. And then how do you make your content accessible? And just kind of a, again, brief reminder that the tools that are available for you to put all of this together, the technical manual and all of the files that we've made available to be kind of launching off points for your own SPARC and TRAC are all available at this bit.ly SUNY SPARC, which is just a shorter version of this longer URL. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go really quick through these slides and give you the overview, and then I'm going to use this as a kind of a template to go back through all of the things that are in Articulate. So I'm kind of like using the slides to fill out what's in my head about all these things. So once you're in Articulate and you have a choice to import video, you're going to have the choice to import it from a file, in which case this is how you're going to do that. But Articulate will also let you insert video from a website. So if you have a YouTube channel and you've already got a video in that space, you can link that way and pull in a video elsewhere on the web. You can also import video directly from your webcam. So if you're kind of putting something together this summer and you're going to do this kind of by the seat of your pants and just pull some stuff together, you could actually just utilize your webcam like you're in a Zoom meeting, and Articulate will capture the video and plunk it right into the slide for you. Again, like so many of these other little aspects of Articulate, once you're into the video area, there's a whole new toolbar and ribbons. So there's, it's kind of like its own little program within the program, the way we saw the player was last week. So we're gonna look at all of the different things that we can do within that space. So I think maybe what we'll do, well, I'm gonna keep going here. This is a hard one to figure out how to do because I would really like to have both open at the same time. So things that you can do within the editing tool or the editing videos, there's something called trim, and a trim will just take off the end. So it's like getting a trim on your hair. It's just trimming off the ends. But in this case with the video, you can trim the front end or the back end. So this is like the most minimal editing you can do, but those do seem to be the places where I found, like when my videographer delivers me some video, there's usually an extra second or two that I don't need. Like I want that student to click the slide and I want it to go live right away and get into the action part. So I'll trim it down to a little bit. Cropping actually changes the size of the video. So you'll import a video in whatever file format or aspect ratio that the video comes in will show up. And maybe you don't want that same aspect ratio. Maybe you want to really zoom in on a person's face. And I think things to think about in that sense is if a student is watching a video on their cell phone, you probably do want to make the face be a larger part of the video so that there's that body language thing taking place. You can also insert a logo, or as Articulate calls it, a watermark. So I will often do that because you may have used logo backdrop or maybe drop that in the background, but being able to put it on top, it kind of covers part of it becomes the foreground layer. So it does make it so that nobody else can really take your video without having that show up. And from within the video thing is where we can do the closed captioning thing. So we'll go through some of these things again as we go through. So I'm going to leave some of those details for that, but you can import closed captions. So if somebody is providing you closed captions already done, boom, you can just import that file. Or there is a captioning tool on board, and we're going to talk about that and some tips and tricks about how to make that work really well and fast. And I would say my experience with closed captioning is that the first one is horrible. Don't let the first video that you close caption be the one that like makes or breaks. You just accept that the first one is really rough, and then you get really quick at it, and it's a skill that's worth investing the time into. In terms of accessibility, if you're not already familiar with these terms, my guess is that everybody's really familiar with ADA Section 508 and the law about that, and making sure that all electronic forms of communication are also accessible. The other one that I look to is WCAG, which is how we pronounce that, WCAG. It stands for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and it's overseen by the WWW group, which is the World Wide Web Consortium. And they have standards for making web content more accessible. And I put up this resource. I do own the book. I think they've jacked up the price since perhaps when I purchased it. I think maybe it was $30 or $40 when I bought it. I think it's a good, it covers all of the things that you need to understand about WCAG, but that said, they also have a lot of free resources right on that website. So I think it does get you up and running pretty quick. So I would just say start with the free resources. If you have questions of like, I think it answers the questions of like, what do I need to do to meet the resources? WCAG has A, AA, and AAA layers of, higher and higher levels of accessibility. So everything that I've provided in SPARC meets like that level A, and I purposefully just kind of stopped at that. So I have videos that meet A requirements because they are just like a person's face with a blank screen behind them. So there's not a lot of descriptive elements. I just really need to give that person's name and title, and that covers the descriptive elements of that video. If you're going to have, panning in the background of different scenes of campus, then you need to provide captioning that also has those parts, and that's more the AA, AAA stuff. So if you have questions about that or just want to explore what's involved in that, this to me is like the quickest resource to go to, or maybe you have a campus expert who can help you with all of that. I have to say that when I went into some meetings on campus and I could use the term WCAG in a sentence properly, it really, like, there's people are like, oh, they weren't expecting me to have that knowledge. So I do think going through the whole the whole process of going through building and creating these programs really gave me a boost in understanding the accessibility language on campus that drives electronic media. So I do see that as one of like the tangible takeaways of going through this process, is that you're going to have, this is like one of those skills that you're going to carry with you and use in a lot of other places in your life on campus. Especially, and I feel like there was a big heavy lift in March when we all went remote, but I think as we're looking at more remote services through the fall semester, again, these are places where you might have already picked up these skills and realizing now that you can bring them back and use them here. So in terms of the electronic accessibility standards, it's really, to me, it's like making sure that there's always a second way of doing things. You have closed captioning so you can read the video, you don't have to hear it. I also added layers into all of the slides that have a video. So if somebody would rather read the written script as opposed to listen to the narration or read the closed captioning, because the closed captioning is still timed to the video. And if you can read it faster, maybe you perhaps like that choice instead. There's alt image tags, which describe the content that appears in graphic form. And you don't have to worry about describing, like, say, maybe you have a watermark or a logo in the background. You don't have to do that on every slide, but if you're maybe use a Venn diagram or an image, so the parts of the slide that have something that is a visually depicted context. Like, I've noticed this a lot, like when I'm like going through social media and there'll be like, say, an article that's covering a conversation on Twitter. So there's all these screenshots of Twitter, but they always have the text of the Twitter underneath it, below it. So that way you can read the screenshot or you can read the text. And so a screen reader would be able to pick up the text. And then last but not least, it's the tab ordering of all of the elements. And I think this is one of those things where I think I've become a better computer user, understanding the tab and return. So you can work your way through the entirety of the SPARC by using tab to move through all of the items, and then the return key or the enter key asks, you know, it clicks for you. So once you're in SPARC, so if you go back to like the HTML version that we've put up there, if you start hitting your tab key, all of a sudden a little yellow box, pretty sure it's yellow, it's either yellow or red, will start to highlight around different elements on the page. And so it allows you to see what is there. And then when, you know, when you tab, and eventually it ends up above the next button and you hit enter and it takes you to the next screen. But I've had times when my mouse has stopped working on the internet, and you can tab and return through pretty much everything on the internet. And it's kind of a nice, it's a good backup system to have. So with that said, I'm going to shift us over. I'm going to stop that PowerPoint. And we're going to go over to Articulate. So let me pull up my slides. So now we can go back, and I'm going to go back through all those things we gave you the quick overview in. So just to start out again, here's story view. What I did today is I created a new scene and created a blank slide. And I went through the process of going ahead and importing a video onto this blank slide already, because it does take a minute or so for a video to import through. And I didn't want to take that time right now, but let me show you what I did to get there. So here's, we'll come back to our untitled slide here. So this is a pretty raw video that I just grabbed from what was available in my file. So as you can see, just import it, and it's really huge. But from here, we're going to go to insert, and we're going to choose video. And here's those choices that I mentioned before: video from file, video from website, record webcam. Flash Movie is slowly going out of favor. Flash is overseen by Adobe. Adobe and Chrome, Google have not played well in the sandbox together for a long time. And so Flash is also not very compliant in terms of accessibility and how it's read by accessibility software. So for all practical purposes, we're just going to pretend that Flash doesn't exist anymore, because it really isn't something we can make use of very much. So to get this video in here, I went import video from file, and I navigated to my SPARC Everything folder with videos, and I picked one of myself for today, just because I didn't want to put my colleagues through that. And then once I said open, this, you know, it gets a little kind of the little import, the temperature bar thing. And it takes a minute to put these in. I'm trying, you know, I think these are the things, right? It becomes, if you're going to import 20 videos in the same day, it becomes, I find it's like one of those tasks where it's not really a difficult task to do it, but because of that pause, stop kind of thing, it does kind of like eat at your brain. So this is one of those times where this is like when I catch up like on my journals, or I'm also cleaning out my inbox. So it's not, it probably takes me longer than it would take if I just focused on this, but for my brain, it's just happier to be, you know, sorting through a couple of things. So I tend to just import all the videos as one thing, and they're all kind of raw and all over the place. But for me, that seems to be the easier way to address that. Once I've clicked my video, and you can see that it's the highlighted thing, it's got the little handles here. I'm going to come up here, and this video tools option ribbon now is here. So we have a lot of things immediately available to us right here, and some choices we need to make. So I can preview the video at this point just by clicking that. I have some access over volume. I think it defaults to medium, so I just kind of leave it there. Again, I feel most of my students are doing this via, quite a few of them are doing it via phone. And if not, it's, you know, pretty small technology. So I don't worry so much. I mean, they're the headphone generation, so I don't worry so much about the volume stuff, because I know that they'll be on top of that. We're going to click this edit video in just a second. Other choices that you can make about the video is, do you want the video to play right on the slide, which is the choice I've made, but you can also set it up so that that video will pop up in a new browser window. So if this is a situation where you've imported a YouTube video, maybe you do want it to open up into another browser, because it might do better on a larger screen. And, you know, again, like I said, I've chosen to keep my videos very simple from a graphic, you know, stance, where it's just a face of a person. But if you're doing like the wide sweeping vistas of your campus because it's beautiful, then maybe you do want to launch it in another browser window to make it available to more folks to see more of those details. Other choices that you have, do you want the video to play automatically, which is what I've had at this point? Do you want somebody to have to click it to start it? Or when triggered, which means that we've got to create a trigger for that, and what is that trigger going to be? So like I said, for me, it's become an automatic thing. This is how the content is delivered on this slide. I don't have video controls shown to students because I want them to experience the whole video, but if you're creating content for other reasons, maybe you do want to have some video controls right below the video. Compression is about file size. I tend to keep compression just on automatic and let Articulate make the best choices for me. I don't feel like I'm doing anything that's going to benefit from a super high bit rate. And also, again, we're talking about students streaming content through the internet, so keeping the the bit rate down seems to make sense to me. So some of these things over here on this side are the same things that we see every place else, like bring forward, send backwards. That's layering stuff on the slide. Is this going to be the top? At this point, this is the only element on this slide, and we'll talk about bringing some more elements in just a second. So, but these are the things that we would deal with as any object. So this is kind of back to those things, like where do you want it? How big is it going to be? Do we want to make it smaller? Do we want to make it larger? So we're just really thinking about the design of how this video fits on the slide. But for right now, let's go into, oh gosh, we have two things to do. Let's talk about editing the video first. So I clicked on this little edit video thing, and now we've got a whole new set of choices here. So I think video, I don't know, I feel like there's some magical thing that the still that is chosen for every video is like the worst possible shot that you could possibly have. So, maybe you don't want this to be the very first thing that students see of you. So trimming would allow us to get rid of that. And once I hit this trim, I get this little blue box and I can drag this back and forth. Come on. So, and that will tell me where my trim is. So it's kind of fun to play with. If you have watched your video, you can also check some of these things here too. So where's the position of my trim start? I want to point to my screen and you can't see that. So trim start and trim end are down here, so I can see what the total length of my video is. And this will tell me how long the video is. So here's kind of a cheat sheet. I tend to be the kind of person where I always have like scraps of paper on my desk. So as you work through your videos and you get them trimmed down, all right, that looks like I'm about to start talking. People unconsciously take a breath right before they start talking. So we can kind of see that inhale motion right there. So I'm going to guess that that's where I'm at. And let's come down here to the end. And obviously my lips are still moving here. I smiled. So my guess is that that's about where the end of the video is. So my trim duration, I have a 1 minute and 4 second video here. So when I want to go back now and program my next button to not show up until the video is complete, I know that this video is 1 minute and 4 seconds long. I'm probably going to make that next button show up right around the 1 minute mark. And that means that students will have to watch 60 seconds out of the 64 before they can go on to the next one. Crop here is telling us the size of the video in pixels. So it's literally 720 pixels this way, 406 pixels this way. But I have a lot of green around me right here. So we're going to choose this crop. And now we can get in here and we can trim this right up close to my face. And honestly, what I'll do is I will try to do the same size for every single video. It makes it easier when you're doing a lot of videos and having kind of a similar background, and you know that as you go from slide to slide, which is going to work. So again, this little, this seems to work pretty well for me, this 442 by 355, these numbers right here. So I would jot this down on a piece of paper. And then when I go to the next slide, to edit a video, I would just kind of make a rectangle until it fit these same numbers. And I would just pull the rectangle so that it centers the person how I want them centered. What I have found is, like, when we're shooting video after video on video shoot day, generally what happens is you get roughly the same aspect ratio. So when you go back for a second day of video shooting, you might have a little bit different size. So it might not give you exactly the same, but the videos that you shoot on the same day are probably going to fit pretty well. So other things that we can do here, we can do a little bit of brightness and contrast. You know, certainly if we go way overboard here, we can see how that looks. Same here. So you have a little bit of wiggle room there if something's not super great. Sometimes it's fun just to play with it a little bit, just to see if something like resonates, like, oh, wait a minute, that's a tiny bit better. In this case, I feel like my videographer did a really good job at capturing the right light. So then the last thing is that inserting the logo or the watermark, and that's right up here as well. Let's see, I have my SPARC trailer here, so let's use that. That's obviously a little too big, so maybe we'll pull that down here. Maybe I want it a little bit more transparent. Here we go. So that gets it pretty light. So higher numbers are going to give you more transparency. Another quick thing that's right here is this change video or reset video. So if you're doing something and then, I don't know, whatever, I don't know, it's 2020, anything can happen, right? So you do some work, but all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't get it what I needed. You can always click reset video and it'll go back to the original file and you can start over and you can do a do-over. The other thing that you have right here is change video. So I'm in a situation right now where, you know, you have my health center director has retired. So in theory, I was going to be in the studio this summer recording a new health center director. And if she was going to be okay with using the script that the previous one had written, I would in theory have had a closed captioning file already created. I just needed to drop in a new video. So in theory, what I would be able to do is just click change video. I could navigate to the video of my new health center director, and everything would come with it. The cropping would come, the trimming would come. So I'd have to fix that a little bit, but the logo would be there. So it would be a faster way to get a new video in without having to do as many different steps. So let's see here. I'm gonna save and close. Let's see how long this takes to, and you can see here, this is the kind of standard kind of process we go through with all things video. The other thing too is be conscious of the fact that once you start adding videos to your file, the size of your file is going to grow pretty enormously. So, you know, depending on where you have it saved, and I don't know if we've talked about this, that Articulate has some days it likes the cloud and some days it does not like the cloud. So I often will work on a file that is saved to my local C drive on my computer, and then when I'm done I will save it back up to the cloud and just kind of start each day with something on my local drive. So I'm downloading, uploading. It does seem that the biggest place where it seems to get a little glitchy is when we get to publishing. So when we're finally finished and we're getting ready to take it out of Articulate Storyline and publishing, getting it ready for the LMS, those are times when we definitely really want to be working on the C drive. But sometimes it's a little bit faster to work on your C drive than on the cloud drive. So videos is one of those places where it might make sense on video day, download a copy to your local drive, add all the videos in, and then upload the whole thing back up to the cloud at the end of the day. So let's talk about adding captioning, which is this tool right here. Now, if we had a file to import, we would have clicked right here. And there's a few different file types that are closed captioning. SRT is the most common one. I'm trying to remember what it stands for. It means something. So it is possible that maybe somebody's providing you with that file, in which case that is super awesome because it's going to save you quite a bit of time because it's going to put all the words in at the right place at the right time. The very first year I did SPARC, this feature was not available in Articulate Storyline 2.0, and I ended up having to use YouTube to do all of the captioning, and that was like a few weeks of my life I won't get back. So this is definitely faster, but if you do say you have a video on YouTube that you want to bring into SPARC, you do have the ability to pull down captioning from YouTube as well, and YouTube does a pretty good job at identifying language, so there's some minimal fixing that you'll have to do. So here's the closed captioning editor. So here's our video again, and here's our controls that we can start and stop and play the video as we're going along. But this down here, this is the waveform. I do have some background as an audio engineer, and I think it makes sense to look at what human language looks like in terms of audio form. These little places where we kind of return back to straight line, those are the natural pauses in speech. So odds are good, these are sentences. So I will often start my closed captioning just by making sure that these boxes, which is where I'm going to put my text, match up to these lines. And Articulate does, and that's why it took a couple seconds for this to open up as a wizard. It was identifying this part for us. But like here's a pause here. I'm going to actually move, and I'm just grabbing it at highlights, and I can just move this with my mouse. And I'm going to pull this one over.
Rebecca, it might be me only,
okay.
But I'm not able to see.
Oh, goodness. All right. I wonder if it popped up as a different screen. Okay. Thank you for alerting me to that. Here we go.
Yes, that's much better.
That's good. This is an excellent face still shot for that moment right there too. Okay, so let's start over again. So this is the closed captioning editor. These are the play controls, so I can play pause once I'm starting, so I can play along and follow along. These are the little boxes here. I've got one highlighted right now in blue. I'm gonna click off of that. So these are all the little boxes that Articulate has given me, and I can. You might be familiar with the belief that alcohol is an aphrodisiac, and you probably could hear that at least through my microphone. So I'm just typing in right here. Hopefully what you've got is you have your scripts that you use for the teleprompter. And so when you have your script, you can have your text editor. You know, I'm a Microsoft Word person, so I would have my Word file open with my script. And probably the first time is, because these videos are in general pretty short, they're less than a minute, what I will often do is I'll listen to the video and read my Word document and just adjust the Word document. You know, they tend to be about, once you've been through the studio, they're always about 95% accurate after that point. There's little language shifts that happen along the way that just kind of fit better than what you originally imagined as you typed up the script. So first I make sure that my Word document matches what's in my video. And then what I'm able to do is I can just copy and paste the text as I go. But I think what we missed out is I realized that I was talking about waveform. So this right here, this is human language right here. All of these little bounces. And when it's a straight line without that little kind of scritchiness there, that's a pause in my breath. So you can kind of read where the sentences are. I'm curious what this part is, because does this belong with this phrase or does it belong with this phrase? But the fact that this pause is shorter than this one, I'm guessing that it probably fits better with this phrase. And so I've got this little bar here, and my first pass through, and I'll tell you another trick too, I often start at the end. It makes it a lot easier because you can kind of get this is my voice is kind of trailing off here. This one looks like there's some kind of something there. Here's one though that doesn't make sense. Articulate gave me this little tiny box. It seems like it's all fixed here. So I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to delete that one. And then I'm going to drag the end of this one to kind of fill in that space. This does feel like it's one whole phrase. So I'm going to go with that. At some point, you'll realize what the right amount of words are on a screen to not fill it all up. You don't want like 3 lines of text here because that's a little bit harder to read. So you kind of have to go through and figure out, you kind of begin to identify what the right size rectangle is for a line of text. But let's see here. But so this is kind of like the first step of going through and getting all of your boxes in the right place, making sure that they're on there. And then, like you said, I would sit there with my Word file. And the other thing that I will often do too, and this is a trick I've learned kind of along the way, like this one's awkward. So I'm going to pull this one maybe to here. That might be a pause. That would make sense. I think there's no right way or wrong way to do this. I just try to get it so that they're all roughly the same size. I mean, certainly you're going to have a sentence and you're going to have a little, you know, you might have a little bit at the end, but like this one here doesn't make any sense to me. Like my gut is we're going to pull, let's see, let's get rid of that one. Let's move this one down. So let's say that I went through this whole thing and went and did that. I would likely start with this one and I would play here and listen to it and figure out what words am I saying in this box, because if I know what words are in this box and this is the end of the script, I automatically know what words go in this box because it's going to be the 5 or 6 words that weren't covered here because it's the end. And so I would kind of hop, skip, and I'll listen to every other one because I know what's here and I can fill in the blanks. So you can get through the closed captioning a little bit faster by doing every other one and filling in the gaps. So again, that's why my first step would be listening to the video while reading the Word document of the script, making sure that the Word document matches the script. And then I've got all of these boxes ready to go. And I don't know. At this point, I really like closed captioning because I like kind of playing around with the boxes. So maybe that's a me thing. that's what closed captioning looks like. Like you said, there is a fair amount of time in that. I think that's the fastest I've gotten down to it. There's definitely like you can use the space bar to play and pause as you're going along. So again, these are, you know, parts of the whole thing that's going along. So let me go back and share back to Articulate here. So the last little bit. So let's talk about tab order and alt image tags. I'm going to come over here. I have this video screen here. I'm going to actually highlight all of the elements on the screen and I'm going to bring them over to this one. Was supposed to go nice and easy. Here it comes. All right, so I'm going to get rid of this video because that's a duplicate video. But so I have all of these things. They're all over the place, and I want to make sure that we want to get them in the right order. So this is where that video before, we might want to bring it forward. We're going to keep bringing it forward until it's on top. We can grab it like most things and move it around. So now we have all of these items on our screen. So what are the important ones? This blue box here doesn't really need to be seen by students who are using a screen reader. It helps us pull that screen away from the background so there's a visual cue there, but if you're not engaging in the content in a visual way, it's not necessary. So any object that you utilize, you can come down here to this accessibility thing, and I right-clicked on that once I'm there. So automatically every object is visible to accessibility tools. This is a situation where it's an item that doesn't need to be seen. So I'm just going to remove that. And when a text reader is coming through, it's not going to see that. As I'm tab ordering through, we're going to skip that. It's just not enough for those other places to go. But like something like this read script button, that would be an important one for somebody to see. So accessibility again. And this is the alternate text. So this box right here is where you can enter what you want people to see. So because this text here is actually embedded in the graphic, it's not words that I've typed on top of a circle, but something I did in Photoshop and brought in as a graphic element. I've added the directions so that when a screen reader gets to this object, it's going to read out click to read script. I'm trying to think, let's see. And here's another good, here's our consent Venn diagram. And here we have a pretty long alt image because this is going to be a really long description of all of the content that's depicted in that Venn diagram. So back to our slide that we're putting together. So maybe we've thought through some of those things. I do recommend that if you're creating elements that you're going to copy and paste over lots of different slides, once you have a slide that you're pretty sure you like the layout of, then you can get in here. You can deal with the accessibility part of, you know, getting that alternate text in there, deciding whether it's an object that needs to be visible or not. And that way, when you copy and paste that across other slides, all of that information is going to come with it. So that's one place where you can address alt image tags. The other place is going to be this right up here, and this is tab order. And again, we're going to, Lisa, let me know if this one doesn't show up either. Can you see that box?
Yes, I can see
Okay. So this allows me to see all of the things on this slide. I'm going to maybe move this over here to the side here. So as I click on these things so my mouse is going over all of these things, but you can see a box is highlighting where all of those elements are. Ideally, when we're thinking about a screen reader, we're gonna read elements the same way we would read text, left to right, top to bottom. So the fact that active bystanders is the first thing that highlights that totally makes sense. We would want that. But logically, the student stories button would be the next thing that we would want to see, which is right here. And if you'll notice that there's also this column here with alternate text. So if you do have a lot of unique items on a slide, it's way faster to click into tab order. You can set the alternate text for every single image on the page all in one place. And so when I have a slide with a lot of elements, as opposed to right clicking, getting into that accessibility file information space, this is a little bit slicker and a little bit faster. So I'm going to come over here and create custom tab order. And I can grab this one, and I want to move this up so it's underneath active bystander, and I have an up and a down button here. And now that one's going to be the next one. So let's see, what would logically make sense next? Probably the video of Rebecca speaking would be the logical next step here. So I'm going to grab the video. I'm going to bring that up. It's Rebecca reading the video. It makes sense to put that next. Do I want to read the script? Yeah, that makes sense. Back button, click to go back one slide. And in this case, the original slide that I pulled this information off of, students have to get into the student stories to go into the next part. So they have to engage with some of the content on the slide layers in that original slide. So maybe I don't want this one at the end. Maybe this is really serving as my next button. So I've decided that maybe I want that next button to not show up until the end. So it would make sense to move that back to the bottom like that, because now there's a timeline element. So there's no there's guidelines, there's no perfect. So there is a lot to judgment in here about how you're going to do things. What I will say is that when you are working on a slide with layers, all of the elements for all of the parts of the slide are going to show up in here. So let me cancel out of there and let me give you an example of that. So I believe, let's see, the consent slide. This has a bunch of different layers. So we have layers for all of the different aspects of the consent definition. So when I go into tab order on this, I have every element for all of those different layers right here. And then I think it's kind of like there's a choice, because certainly you're not going to see all these things every single time. You know, you're only going to see these items when you're on the incapacitated slide layer. So sometimes what you have to do is, like right now, let's see, consent a checklist is the name of my slide. So anything that is consent a checklist at the front end of the name is the things that appear on that basic bottom slide. So I would probably start here. I'm going to just, yep, it takes me down through all those buttons, but back button, next button. I would save that. If I think the is clear layer is the next one, that is tab order. So I would come over here and I would click on the is clear slide layer, come back to tab order. Let's see, let's navigate down to is clear. So here's the 4 elements that appear on that slide layer. So I can make sure that those are all where I want them to be. Either that or you have to have a good memory of what's on everything. But this is, again, this is one of those places where it really makes sense to take the time to name your layers, name your slide, because when you're in one of these places, it takes a while to get through all this content. And one last thing that I want to talk about, alt tabs, and I think that's going to get us through all the things we need to do. The elements that exist on the master slide. So we talked about master slides a while ago out here. So when we're in this, let me come back out here a second. So we're in tab order. Let's see, module 2 content oval. Where is that showing up? So that's right up here. That's possibly something that is actually on the master slide. So if I wanted to take that out of tab order and to affect some of the accessibility things in there, I need to go into the slide master and come out here and see if it actually exists out here. So here's that dot again. So if I wanted to take that out of accessibility or out of the alt tab thing, let's see, well, let me click that. There it is. If I turn it off here, this is where I'm going to have to ultimately turn off the alt text. So if you need to add alt text or edit alt text or take something out of tab order and it exists on your templates, you're going to have to come back out to the master view and you have to do it through this accessibility toolbar. So those are some of those places where you can have a frustrating moment and be like, what is going on? Like, it's not here, it's not letting me change this thing. And ultimately that's where it is. So remembering that there might be some things hidden out on your master slides that are impeding you moving through the process to get to the next thing. I would say that, again, tab order is one of those things where it does take some time to do that. I tend to not do this. Like, if I was doing this, I wouldn't necessarily be working like this slide and then this slide and then this slide and this slide. I tend to find that frustrating. I tend to start with the slides that have the fewest elements on them, and then I save some of the harder ones. Again, this is one of those tasks that I find is a little bit easier, like first thing in the morning before the caffeine is totally hit. Like, I think there's part of my brain that fights this process. So being, knowing your own personality and when these are good things to do this. But like some of those slides, like this consent slide where there are so many layers and so many elements, like to me, like that would be the one slide I would do on a given day to get through the tab order stuff, just because I do find that it's a little bit frustrating at times. You can't just necessarily grab stuff and move stuff. You have to sit there with the arrow key to move it through. So I think those are all the things I wanted to talk about. Yep, we talked about importing videos, we talked about editing videos, putting in that watermark logo, we talked about closed captioning, alt images, tab order. So, to me, the focus is more about how you get in there and do stuff. There was a period of time when I was working on this where I was on a committee that, like everybody ends up on the committees you don't necessarily want to be on, but you feel like you have to do them. And so I was on this committee, and I was, the director of accessibility services was also on it. And the meeting happened to be at the far end of campus, and both his office and mine were at the other end of campus. So it ended up being so worthwhile sitting on that committee, because for that 10-minute walk each week back from the meeting back to our offices, like I was able to, like, I'd have my question or two of the week. I'm like, so talk to me about all image tags. So I took advantage of that space and that time. So I think, identifying the person that you have on your campus that can assist you with, like, when you get to those points, I think, a lot of it, you have to just kind of jump in and do, and you realize the questions as you go. So hopefully that's like the broad overview of the things that you need to do to get to that level. But we're getting closer now to the point where you would have something that is ready to go out into LMS. So to me, these are kind of the last things that I do. Tab order is the last thing I do once I'm like 98% sure that my content is all in there, because you start adding more stuff, then you got to go back and do the tab order stuff again. So this is really getting to the place where you have a product that's getting ready to go out the door. So I'm going to stop sharing at that point. So yeah, are there any questions about anything we've done so far, or worries or panics, or
Do you want me
all
to
of your
unmute everyone, or should we use the chat function?
Or I think people can unmute themselves, right?
Oh, can they?
So,
I don't know.
yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
So again, here's the call out. If you have questions, comments, things that we can help with, drop us a message in the chat or go ahead and unmute yourself and ask. And other than that, we are done presenting new content for this week. I'm willing to hang out for a little bit. Maybe Lisa, we can stop recording at this point, and maybe I don't know if anybody would prefer to ask a question when we're not recording.
Okay, I'll stop the recording.